Captain Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of his ship Unity, looking out at the massive space station called Nexus Prime. The station was huge, bigger than any city on Earth. It spun slowly in the darkness of space, its lights twinkling like stars. This was the home of the Galactic Council, where the most powerful species in the galaxy made their decisions. Jake felt nervous. Today, the Council would decide the fate of an entire species called the Kalari. Their home planet was dying, and they needed help. Jake hoped the galaxy would show mercy. His second-in-command, Commander Lisa Parker, walked up beside him. She was a tall woman with short brown hair and worried eyes. "The meeting starts in 10 minutes, Captain," she said quietly. Jake nodded. "Any word from Earth about our position?" "President Rodriguez sent her final message an hour ago. We're authorized to support the Kalari rescue, but we can't promise more than we can deliver." They walked together through the station's long corridors. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved past them. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others floated in the air or crawled on multiple limbs. The Ithrians towered over everyone else, their gray skin and for arms making them look like ancient warriors. The small, blue Centauri scurried between the larger species, their big eyes always watching. The council chamber was enormous. Hundreds of seats arranged in circles faced a central platform where speakers would present their cases. Jake and Lisa took their places in the section marked for humanity. They were alone there, which made Jake feel small and isolated. The session began when the Ithrian ambassador raised his 4 arms for silence. His voice boomed across the chamber through the translation devices everyone wore. "We gathered today to discuss the Kalari situation," he announced. "Their star is dying. Their planet will be destroyed within 2 years. They request our help to relocate their population." A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, showing the Kalari homeworld. It was beautiful, with purple oceans and silver cities that seemed to grow from the ground like plants. The Kalari themselves appeared on screen next. They were tall and graceful, with pale skin that glowed softly with changing colors. Their eyes were large and kind, and they moved with gentle, flowing motion. Jake watched the footage and felt his heart break a little. These were clearly peaceful people who had never hurt anyone. The Ithrian ambassador continued speaking. "The Kalari population numbers 3 billion individuals. They have requested refugee status and assistance in finding new worlds to colonize." A murmur went through the chamber. 3 billion was a massive number, even for the galaxy's advanced civilizations. The Altarian representative stood next. The Altarians looked like humans, but were taller and had silver hair. "The Council has reviewed all available data about the Kalari species," she said in a cold voice. "Our conclusion is that they do not meet the criteria for refugee assistance." Jake felt his stomach drop. This was not what he had hoped to hear. "The Kalari have made no significant contributions to galactic civilization," the Altarian continued. "They have no advanced technology to offer. They have no military capabilities. They follow a philosophy of complete nonviolence, which makes them unsuitable for the realities of galactic politics. Most importantly, relocating 3 billion beings will require enormous resources that could be better used supporting species with greater potential." More aliens stood to speak. The Draconian Trade Federation representative, a lizard-like creature with golden scales, agreed with the Altarians. "Resources are limited," he hissed. "We must use them wisely." The Zephyrian Military Alliance delegate, a being that looked like it was made of living metal, added his voice to the chorus. "The Kalari weakness makes them a liability. In our sector of space, only the strong survive." One by one, the great powers of the galaxy spoke against helping the Kalari. They used words like evolutionary dead end and natural selection and resource allocation efficiency. But Jake heard something else in their voices. Fear. Fear that helping one weak species would mean they would have to help others. Jake looked around the chamber and realized with growing horror that almost everyone agreed. The Kalari were going to be abandoned. Finally, it was time for the vote. The chamber fell silent as each species representative entered their decision into the voting system. The results appeared on the giant screen above them. 847 votes against providing aid. Only 2 votes in favor. Jake looked at the screen in shock. Only humanity and the small Centauri delegation had voted to help the Kalari. Everyone else had decided to let an entire species die. The Ithrian ambassador made the final announcement. The Galactic Council has spoken. The Kalari situation is classified as a natural evolutionary event. No council resources will be allocated for refugee assistance. This matter is now closed. Jake stood up slowly. His hands were shaking with anger and sadness. Around him, the other species were already talking about other business, as if they hadn't just condemned 3 billion innocent people to death. Lisa put her hand on his shoulder. "Captain, we need to go." But Jake wasn't ready to leave yet. He had something to say. "I request permission to address the council," he called out. The chamber grew quiet again. The Ithrian ambassador looked annoyed. "The matter has been decided human." "I understand that," Jake said, his voice carrying across the huge room. "But I want everyone here to remember this day. You've just proven that the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy can't find room in their hearts for 3 billion people who never hurt anyone. You've shown that intelligence and technology mean nothing without compassion." He looked around at all the alien faces staring at him. "The Kalari may be weak by your standards, but at least they've never sentenced an entire species to death because it was inconvenient to help them." Jake turned and walked out of the chamber, with Lisa following close behind. Behind them, the council had already moved on to other business, as if the Kalari had never existed at all. But Jake Morrison was not ready to forget. As he walked back toward his ship, he was already making plans. The galaxy might have given up on the Kalari, but humanity had not. Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair aboard the Unity, staring at the large screen that showed Earth in the distance. 3 days had passed since the council's cruel decision, and he still felt angry about it. The image of those gentle Kalari faces haunted his dreams. "Captain, we have a priority communication from Earth," said Communications Officer Amy Chun. She was a young woman with black hair tied back in a neat ponytail. "It's President Rodriguez herself." Jake straightened up, put on the main screen. The image of Earth disappeared, replaced by the face of President Helen Rodriguez. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. Behind her stood Secretary of Defense Robert Johnson and Admiral Patricia Hayes, the head of Earth's small space fleet. "Captain Morrison," the president began, "we've received your report about the council's decision. We're calling an emergency session to discuss our response." Jake nodded. "Madam President, with respect, while we're talking, the Kalari are dying. Their star is getting worse every day." "We understand the urgency," said Admiral Hayes. She was a tough-looking woman with short silver hair. "But we have to be realistic. Earth has only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. We're still the new kids, and we're not very popular." Secretary Johnson leaned forward. "Captain, you need to understand our position. We have barely enough ships to protect our own colonies. Our economy is struggling to keep up with the technology gap between us and the older species. Taking on 3 billion refugees could destroy us." Jake felt his anger rising again. "So we just let them die because it's inconvenient?" "It's not about convenience," President Rodriguez said firmly. "It's about survival. If we bankrupt ourselves trying to save the Kalari, we might end up needing rescue ourselves." The conversation was interrupted when Dr. Kevin Walsh appeared on screen. He was the head of Earth's Xenobiology Institute, a thin man with messy brown hair and thick glasses. "Madam President, I've been studying the data about the Kalari. We're making a huge mistake if we ignore them." "Explain," Admiral Hayes said. Dr. Walsh pulled up a holographic display. "Everyone thinks the Kalari are weak and useless, but they're wrong. Look at their biology. They communicate through patterns of light on their skin. This system is actually more efficient than most electronic communication networks. They never have signal interference or system crashes." He switched to another display. "Their agricultural methods are incredible. They can grow food in conditions that would kill most plants. Their crops produce 3 times more nutrition than standard galactic food sources." "That's interesting, Doctor, but it doesn't change the math," Secretary Johnson said. "We still can't afford to save 3 billion people. But what if we don't have to save all of them at once?" Jake interrupted. Everyone looked at him. What if we start small? Save who we can learn from them and build from there. Dr. Walsh nodded excitedly. Exactly. The Kalari have something else that makes them special. They're natural empaths. They can sense emotions and help resolve conflicts. In our current galactic situation, having friends who can help with diplomacy could be invaluable. Commander Lisa Parker, who had been quiet until now, spoke up from beside Jake. Captain's right. We don't have to save everyone immediately, but we have to start somewhere. President Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. Jake could see her thinking, weighing the options. Finally, she spoke. The cabinet is split on this issue. Half think we should stay out of it to protect our own interests. The other half believes this is our chance to show the galaxy what humanity stands for. What do you think, Madam President? Jake asked. She smiled sadly. I think we've always been the underdogs. Captain, maybe it's time we started acting like it. We'll make an offer to the Kalari. It won't be much, but it will be something. Admiral Hayes looked worried. Helen, this could make us enemies of some very powerful species. We're already not very popular, the president replied. At least this way, we'll know we did the right thing. 2 hours later, Jake stood in the ship's communication room as Amy Chin established contact with the Kalari homeworld. The signal took several minutes to reach across space, and then several more minutes for the reply to come back. When the Kalari leader finally appeared on screen, Jake was struck by her beauty and grace. Zara Kim was tall and elegant, with pale skin that flickered with soft patterns of blue and silver light. Her large eyes held wisdom and sadness. Greetings, human captain, she said, her voice musical and gentle. We are honored by your contact, though we do not understand why you reach out to us. Jake took a deep breath. Zara Kim, I bring an offer from the human government. We know your star is dying, and we know the council has refused to help you. We want to offer what assistance we can. The patterns of light on Zara Kim's skin changed to deeper blues, which Jake's translator indicated meant surprise and hope. You would help us? But your species barely knows us. What do you gain from this? Jake thought about how to answer. We gain the knowledge that we did what was right. We can't save everyone, but we can save some. Earth can initially take 50,000 of your people. We're also working on setting up agricultural colonies on other worlds where more of your people could live. Zara Kim's skin now glowed with warm golden patterns. Captain Morrison, your offer brings light to our darkest hour. But we must discuss this among our people. Our philosophy teaches us never to burden others with our problems. This isn't a burden, Jake said firmly. This is a choice. We're choosing to help because it's the right thing to do. After the communication ended, Jake stood alone in the quiet room. He had just committed humanity to the biggest rescue mission in their history. They had no idea if they could actually pull it off, but they were going to try. Chief Engineer Danny Brooks walked in, a young man with red hair and grease-stained hands. Captain, I've been listening to the chatter on the council networks. Word is already spreading about our offer to the Kalari. Some species are calling us fools. Jake smiled grimly. Danny, we've been called worse things. Get the ship ready for a long journey. I have a feeling we're about to find out what humanity is really made of. Outside the ship's windows, the stars seemed brighter than usual, as if the universe itself was watching to see what the humans would do next. 6 months later, Captain Ben Clark stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching as the dying star grew larger on his screen. The star was red and angry, throwing off massive flares that made space itself dangerous. In a few more months, it would explode and destroy everything in the system. Ben was a stocky man with gray hair and steady hands. He had been flying cargo ships for 20 years, but nothing had prepared him for this mission. His ship, once used to carry supplies between Earth's colonies, had been completely rebuilt. Where cargo containers once sat, there were now living quarters, medical bays, and life support systems for thousands of refugees. How many ships do we have in the fleet now? Ben asked his first officer, Sam Martinez. Sam checked his tablet. 47 ships, Captain. Everything from old cargo haulers like us to converted passenger liners. Even Captain Tracy Adams brought her military destroyer Defiant. though she had to remove most of her weapons to make room for people. Ben nodded. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, and it still wouldn't be enough. The Kalari had 3 billion people on their dying world. The human fleet could maybe save 200,000 in this first trip. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Kalari surface," said Communications Officer Julie Wong. "Put it through." The screen filled with the gentle face of Thren Vex, the Kalari coordinator, working with the rescue mission. Like all Kalari, he was tall and graceful, with skin that glowed in soft patterns of light. Right now, those patterns showed calm determination mixed with deep sadness. "Captain Clark, we have prepared the first group for evacuation. 50,000 individuals, mostly children and their families, as we discussed." Ben felt a weight in his chest. They had made the horrible decision to save the youngest first, knowing that millions of older Kalari would be left behind. "We're ready to begin transport, Thren Vex. Our shuttles are launching now." The rescue operation began immediately. Small transport shuttles flew back and forth between the human ships and the Kalari surface, each trip bringing more refugees aboard. Ben watched through the ship's cameras as families of Kalari walked onto his vessel. The Kalari were nothing like the other alien species Ben had met. They moved quietly and gracefully, their skin glowing with gentle patterns that his translator told him meant gratitude and hope. The children stayed close to their parents, their large eyes wide with wonder at the human technology around them. Dr. Maria Santos, the mission's chief medical officer, was amazed by what she discovered about Kalari biology. "Captain, you need to see this," she called Ben to medical bay. Ben found Dr. Santos examining a young Kalari child who had been injured during the evacuation. The child's arm was broken, but as Ben watched, the injury began to heal much faster than it should have. "They don't just communicate with those light patterns," Dr. Santos explained. "Their luminescent organs can actually help healing. This child's arm will be completely fixed in 2 days instead of 2 weeks." "That's incredible," Ben said. "It gets better. The healing effect works on humans too. I had a crew member with a bad cut, and when one of the Kalari healers touched the wound, it started healing immediately." Ben was amazed, but he didn't have time to think about it. The mission was getting more dangerous every hour. The dying star was throwing off radiation that interfered with the ship's navigation systems. Twice, shuttles had gotten lost in the chaos and barely made it back to the fleet. Worse, several galactic species were actively trying to stop the rescue. The Ithrians had blocked the fastest hyperspace routes, forcing the human fleet to take dangerous shortcuts through areas of space that most ships avoided. The Draconians were spreading false information about solar flares to try to scare away human pilots. "Captain," Sam Martinez called urgently, "we're getting reports from the outer ships. 3 Ithrian warships just appeared at the edge of the system." Ben felt his heart sink. "Are they going to attack?" "No, sir, but they're scanning all our ships. They're probably gathering intelligence to report back to the Council about our capabilities." The harassment continued as the rescue progressed. Strange technical problems kept appearing on human ships, problems that seemed designed to slow down the evacuation. Navigation computers would suddenly fail. Communication systems would develop mysterious interference. Life support systems would require constant repairs. But the humans kept working. Captain Tracy Adams of the Defiant used her military training to coordinate the shuttle flights like a combat operation. The cargo ship captains pushed their converted vessels beyond safe limits, cramming in as many refugees as possible. The Kalari helped in ways no one expected. Their ability to enter low-energy sleep states meant they could survive the long journey, using less food and oxygen than normal. Their empathic abilities let them sense when human crew members were getting stressed or exhausted, and they would quietly help calm them down. Ben watched in amazement as Kalari children played with human crew members, their skin glowing with happy patterns that needed no translation. Despite the danger and sadness of the situation, there were moments of pure joy as 2 species learned to trust each other. On the 3rd day of evacuation, the crisis came. The star's collapse accelerated beyond all predictions. What should have been a gradual process over months was happening in days. "Captain," Sam shouted, "the star is going unstable. We have maybe 6 hours before the system becomes too dangerous for our ships." Ben made the hardest decision of his life. Signal all ships. Emergency evacuation procedures. Take everyone you can fit. Safety regulations be damned. We're not leaving anyone behind who we can save. The next 6 hours were chaos. Shuttles flew constant trips, overloaded with refugees. Ships designed to carry a few hundred people packed in thousands. The Kalari, understanding the emergency, helped by organizing themselves efficiently and asking for nothing except a chance to live. As the human fleet finally left the dying system, Ben stood on his bridge surrounded by the soft glow of Kalari families. They had saved nearly 300,000 people. Not nearly enough, but more than anyone thought possible. Behind them, the star continued its death spiral. In a few more days, it would explode, taking with it the beautiful world that had been the Kalari home for thousands of years. But the Kalari were not extinct. Thanks to humanity's stubborn refusal to give up, their species would continue. As Ben watched the refugees settling into their temporary homes aboard his ship, he realized that humanity had just taken the first step toward changing how the galaxy thought about helping others. The question was, would the galaxy let them finish what they had started? Ambassador Frank Turner walked into the Galactic Council chamber, feeling like he was walking into a courtroom where he was already guilty. The rescue of the Kalari had made headlines across the galaxy, but not the kind of headlines humanity wanted. Frank was a calm man in his 60s with silver hair and a diplomatic smile, but today he felt anything but calm. Around him, representatives from hundreds of species filled their seats, and most of them looked angry. The Ithrian ambassador stood up, his 4 arms raised dramatically. The human species has committed a grave violation of galactic law and order, he announced, his voice booming to the translation devices. They have interfered with natural evolutionary processes and wasted precious resources on a species that the Council rightfully deemed unworthy of assistance. Frank stood to respond, but the Ithrian continued. Furthermore, they have set a dangerous precedent. If every weak species expects rescue when they face extinction, our entire civilization will collapse under the burden of endless charity. One by one, other species joined the attack. The Altarian representative accused humans of emotional decision-making that threatens galactic stability. The Draconian delegate called a rescue, a waste of resources that could have been used productively. Frank finally got his chance to speak. Honored representatives, humanity stands by its decision to help the Kalari. We believe that preserving life, any life, makes our galaxy stronger, not weaker. The response was immediate and harsh. The Zephyrian Military Alliance representative, his metallic body gleaming under the chamber lights, stood up. Weakness breeds weakness. Human, your species will learn this lesson the hard way. The threats weren't just words. Within days of the council session, the economic warfare began. The powerful Draconian Trade Federation announced they were cutting all commercial ties with human worlds. Overnight, Earth's colonies found themselves unable to buy essential supplies like medical equipment and advanced computer systems. The Altarian Republic closed their jump gates to human vessels, adding weeks of travel times between Earth and its outer colonies. Even smaller species, afraid of being punished for associating with humans, began limiting their trade and communication. On Earth, President Helen Rodriguez faced the worst crisis of her administration. Food prices jumped as agricultural imports were blocked. Unemployment rose as factories couldn't get the alien technology they needed to operate. In major cities like New York and London, protesters filled the streets with signs reading, "Stop bleeding for aliens" and "Earth First." Madam President, Secretary of Defense Robert Johnson said during an emergency cabinet meeting, "The economic damage is getting worse every day. Some advisors are recommending that we return the Kalari refugees to reduce the pressure." President Rodriguez looked tired and older than her years. Absolutely not. We made a commitment and we're keeping it. But unexpected support came from the refugees themselves. On the colony world of Haven, where many Kalari had been settled, Commander Lisa Parker was witnessing something remarkable. "Captain Morrison, you need to see this," Lisa said during a video call to Jake's ship. Behind her, Jake could see vast fields of crops growing in soil that had been considered too poor for farming. The Kalari agricultural techniques are incredible, Lisa continued. They've increased our food production by 300%. Crops that used to fail in this soil are now thriving. Jake smiled for the first time in weeks. That's great news, but how are they adapting to life with humans? Better than we could have hoped. They're not just adapting, they're helping. You know how our colonists have been struggling with depression and anxiety? The Kalari empaths have been working with our doctors. Mental health problems have dropped by 60% in areas where they're living. The innovations kept coming. Dr. Maria Santos, now working full-time with Kalari healers, reported breakthrough after breakthrough. Jake, their bioluminescent communication systems work perfectly in conditions that destroy our electronics. We've started using Kalari translators on deep space missions because their natural abilities are more reliable than our technology. But the galaxy's pressure was intensifying. Intelligence reports from Earth suggested that several species were considering military action to force humanity to abandon the Kalari. The economic blockade was working. Earth's economy was shrinking, and public support for the rescue was falling. The crisis reached a breaking point when a human supply convoy traveling to the outer colonies was attacked by unknown ships in neutral space. 3 cargo vessels were destroyed, and dozens of crew members were killed. Admiral Patricia Hayes called an emergency meeting with the president. The attack was professionally done, she reported grimly. No identification on the ships, no survivors left behind. But our intelligence suggests it was probably the Zephyrians. Can we prove it? President Rodriguez asked. No, and that's the point. They're sending a message without officially declaring war. The message is clear: abandon the Kalari or face more attacks. Jake Morrison, who had returned to Earth for the meeting, felt his anger rising. So they're willing to murder humans to force us to let the Kalari die? It appears so, Admiral Hayes said. And it's working. 3 more species announced trade restrictions yesterday. The Rigelian Consortium just canceled their contracts for human-made electronics. The situation seemed hopeless. Earth was isolated, economically strangled, and facing the threat of more attacks. The Kalari refugees, despite their amazing contributions, were being blamed for humanity's troubles. In the temporary refugee camps on Haven, Zarkim, the Kalari leader called her people together. The graceful woman's skin glowed with patterns of deep sadness as she spoke. My people, we have brought great trouble to the humans who saved us. Perhaps we should consider leaving, finding our own way in the galaxy, to spare them further suffering. But Threnvex, the coordinator who had worked closely with the human rescue teams, responded with patterns of determined light. Leader Zarakim, the humans chose to help us knowing the cost. If we abandon them now, we prove that the Council was right about us being weak. Young Kalari, who had grown up around humans, spoke up too. We are not the same people who lived in isolation on our dying world. We have learned from the humans, and they have learned from us. We are stronger together. As debates raged on both Earth and Haven about what to do next, space sensors detected something that would change everything. A massive fleet of unknown ships had appeared at the edge of the galaxy, and they were heading toward the core worlds. But these weren't Kalari ships or human ships, or ships from any known species. They were something else entirely, and their intentions were unclear. Jake Morrison, monitoring the reports from his ship, realized that the galaxy's obsession with punishing humanity for helping Kalari had distracted everyone from a much bigger threat approaching from the dark spaces between the stars. The question was, would the galaxy realize the danger in time, or would their anger at humanity's compassion blind them to the real enemy heading their way? Dr. Maria Santos stared at the emergency message on her screen with growing horror. The text was simple, but its meaning was terrifying. Unknown plague outbreak in Rigel system. Death toll rising rapidly. All available medical personnel requested immediately. Maria was aboard the human medical ship Mercy, which had been converted from a passenger liner to serve the Kalari refugees. Next to her stood Nian Kel, a Kalari healer whose skin glowed with worried patterns of dark blue light. "How bad is it?" asked Captain Jake Morrison, who had arrived as soon as he heard the news. Maria pulled up the latest reports. "It's worse than anything we've seen. The plague has already killed over 2 million people across 5 different species in the Rigel system. They're calling it ghost fever because victims become transparent before they die. What makes it so dangerous? Jake asked. It spreads faster than any known disease, and nothing works against it. The Council's best doctors have tried every treatment they know. Antiviral drugs, radiation therapy, even surgical removal of infected tissue. Nothing stops it. Niankel moved closer to the screen, his large eyes studying the medical data. The patterns on his skin shifted to deeper blues and purples. Captain Morrison, this disease affects the bioelectric fields of living beings. Our healers might be able to help. Maria looked surprised. What do you mean? Kalari healing works through bioluminescent energy manipulation, Niankel explained. If this plague attacks bioelectric systems, we might be able to detect and counter in ways your technology cannot. Jake thought for a moment. The galaxy had spent months punishing humanity for saving Kalari. Now, there was a chance for the refugees to prove their worth to the very species that had condemned them. Maria, how long would it take to get the Mercy to Rigel? About 4 days if we push the engines hard. Do it. Send a message to the Rigel authorities. Tell them we're coming with a joint human Kalari medical team. The response from Rigel came back within hours and surprised everyone. The same council species that had voted against helping the Kalari were now desperate enough to accept aid from anyone, even the worthless refugees they had condemned. As the Mercy traveled toward Rigel, Maria worked closely with Niankel and 3 other Kalari healers to understand the plague better. What they discovered was unlike anything in medical records. The disease doesn't just infect cells, Maria explained to Jake. It actually disrupts the electrical signals that keep living beings alive. That's why conventional treatments don't work. They're trying to fight a biological problem with biological solutions, but this is really an energy problem. Young Kalari healer Prensil, who was barely an adult by Kalari standards, made the first breakthrough. Her skin glowed with excited golden patterns as she studied the plague samples under a microscope. Dr. Santos, look at this, she said, her musical voice filled with wonder. When I focused my bioluminescent organs on the plague sample, the organisms stopped moving. Maria looked through the microscope and gasped. The plague organisms, which had been writhing and multiplying rapidly, had suddenly become still and lifeless. How did you do that? I created a specific pattern of bioelectric pulses, Prensil explained. The plague organisms seemed to get confused by certain frequencies and stopped functioning. When the Mercy arrived at Rigel, they found the system in chaos. The main space station was under quarantine, with millions of beings from dozens of species trapped inside. Hospital ships from across the galaxy floated nearby, but they were just collecting the dead and trying to prevent the plague from spreading further. Jake was amazed when the Rigel authorities actually welcomed their arrival. The same Ithrian officials who had condemned humanity for helping the Kalari now begged for assistance from the very people they had called worthless. Captain Morrison, said Administrator Vexen, a tall Ithrian whose gray skin showed signs of early plague infection, our people are dying by the thousands. If your Kalari healers can help, we will be forever grateful. The medical team immediately went to work. Human doctors provided technological support, while Kalari healers used their natural abilities to map the plague's bioelectric signature. Working together, they developed a treatment that neither species could have created alone. The process was exhausting. Kalari healers would focus their bioluminescent organs on infected patients, while human medical equipment amplified and directed their natural energies. Slowly, patient by patient, the death rate began to drop. It's working, Maria reported to Jake after the first day. We've saved over 300 patients already. But the healers are getting tired. This kind of intensive energy work is draining for them. Niankel, his skin now showing the pale patterns that indicated exhaustion, refused to stop working. Dr. Santos, we have spent our entire history as a species that others considered useless. This is our chance to prove that every life has value, including our own. Word of the breakthrough spread across the galaxy through the same communication networks that had once carried condemnation of the human rescue mission. Species that had cut trade with Earth suddenly sent messages requesting medical assistance from human Kalari teams. The irony was not lost on anyone. The Draconians, who had led the economic boycott against humanity, now asked for Kalari healers to save their colonies. The Altarians, who had called to rescue a waste of resources, offered to pay enormous sums for access to the new treatment. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Mercy, watching as shuttle after shuttle carried saved patients back to their home ships. The Kalari refugees, who had been called evolutionary dead ends, were now being hailed as heroes across the galaxy. "Captain," said Communications Officer Amy Chun, "we're receiving messages from over 40 different species. They all want to establish medical partnerships with us." But the victory came with a price. As the plague was finally contained, reports came in that it had evolved. The original treatment was becoming less effective, and new strains were appearing in other systems. Captain Morrison, Dr. Santos called urgently. "We need to get back to our research labs. The plague is adapting to our treatment. We need to develop new approaches before it spreads again." Jake realized that this was just the beginning. The galaxy had learned that the worthless Kalari were actually invaluable partners in fighting threats that traditional medicine couldn't handle. But now they face an enemy that could adapt and change faster than any normal disease. As the Mercy prepared to leave Rigel, Administrator Vex then made a public announcement that was broadcast across the galaxy. "The human Kalari medical team has saved over 50,000 lives in our system. We formally retract our previous statements about Kalari worthlessness and request continued cooperation in fighting this plague." Similar announcements came from other species as the news spread. The galaxy was slowly beginning to understand that their prejudices had nearly cost them the solution to their greatest medical crisis. But Jake knew this was only the first test. The plague was still out there, evolving and spreading. Captain Ben Clark stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Harmony, watching as his mixed crew of humans and Kalari worked together with an efficiency that amazed him. 6 months had passed since the plague crisis at Rigel, and everything in the galaxy had changed. The Harmony was the first official joint human-Kalari exploration vessel. Half the crew was human, half was Kalari, and they had learned to work together in ways that neither species could manage alone. The ship's corridors glowed softly with Kalari bioluminescent communication patterns, while human technology provided the power and navigation systems. "Captain," called Lieutenant Jenny Foster, a young human officer with bright red hair, "we're approaching the coordinates for the anomaly. The sensor readings are really strange." Ben walked over to the science station where Dr. Kevin Walsh was working alongside Kalari scientist Quen Rill. The two had become close friends despite their very different backgrounds. "What are we looking at, Doctor?" Ben asked. Dr. Walsh pointed to the screen, which showed a massive object floating in the darkness between stars. "It's ancient, Captain. Really ancient. Our scans suggest it's been drifting out here for at least 50,000 years. Quen Rill's skin glowed with excited purple patterns as he studied the readings. "Captain Clark, this vessel is larger than anything in our current databases. The technology signatures are completely unknown." Ben felt a chill run down his spine. "Is it dangerous?" "We don't think so," Dr. Walsh replied. "It appears to be completely dead. No power readings at all. But the hull material is something we've never seen before." The Harmony carefully approached the derelict ship. As they got closer, Ben could see that it was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the largest council vessels. The design was graceful but alien, with flowing curves that reminded him somehow of both human and Kalari aesthetics. "Captain, we're detecting a small section where the hull has been breached," reported Chief Engineer Paula Martinez. "We could send a boarding party through there." Ben made the decision quickly. "Dr. Walsh, Quen Rill, select a small team. I want to know what this thing is and where it came from." 3 hours later, the boarding party returned with news that shocked everyone. The derelict wasn't just any ancient ship. It was a library vessel containing the complete records of a galactic civilization that had existed before any of the current species had even developed space travel. Dr. Walsh was practically vibrating with excitement as he presented his findings to the crew. "Captain, this changes everything we know about galactic history. This civilization was incredibly advanced, but according to their records, they destroyed themselves." "How?" Ben asked. Quen Rill's skin showed deep blue patterns of sadness as he translated more of the ancient records. They develop a philosophy very similar to what the current council follows. They believe that only the strongest and most advanced species deserved resources and protection. They gradually abandoned cooperation with what they called lesser species. Dr. Walsh pulled up holographic displays showing the ancient civilization's history. At first, their policy seemed successful. They became incredibly powerful and technologically advanced. But over time, they lost the ability to work together. When a real crisis came, something they called a void storm, they couldn't cooperate enough to save themselves. What happened to them? Ben asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. They went extinct, Quenril said quietly. Their final records show them arguing about which species deserved to be saved while their entire civilization collapsed around them. The implications were staggering. The current Galactic Council was following the exact same path that had led a previous civilization to extinction. Ben immediately sent the findings to Earth and to every species he could contact. The response was mixed. Admiral Patricia Hayes was fascinated by the discovery and ordered full documentation of everything they found. President Rodriguez called it the most important archaeological find in galactic history. But the Council species reacted very differently. The Ithrian Empire dismissed the findings as ancient propaganda with no relevance to modern civilization. The Altarian Republic claimed that the records were probably fake, created by humans to justify their misguided policies. However, not all species were so dismissive. The Centauri Federation, humanity's longtime allies, announced that the discovery proved the importance of cooperation between all species. Several smaller species that had remained neutral during the Kalari crisis began reaching out to establish diplomatic relations with the Human-Kalari Alliance. Meanwhile, back on Earth's colonies, something remarkable was happening. The first generation of Kalari who had grown up in human society was coming of age. These young Kalari were different from their parents. They had learned human languages perfectly while keeping their own culture, and they served as natural bridges between the two species. Vexton was one of these young Kalari. She had been only 10 years old when her family was rescued from the dying homeworld, and now she was 20 and working as a diplomatic translator. Her skin could show the traditional Kalari light patterns while she spoke perfect English, making her invaluable in negotiations. "Captain Morrison," she said during a video call to Jake's ship, "I've been monitoring the galactic communication networks. The discovery of the ancient ship is causing major debates in the Council. Some species are starting to question whether their current policies are wise." Jake smiled. "That's encouraging news, Vexton. Any word from the moderate factions?" "Yes, sir. The Rigelian Consortium wants to establish a formal alliance with us. They say the plague crisis proved that cooperation between species produces better results than competition. But the good news came with warnings. Intelligence reports suggested that the hardline Council species were planning some kind of response to the growing human-Kalari influence. The Zephyrian Military Alliance was conducting large-scale military exercises near human space, and the Ithrian Empire had begun expanding their fleet. Dr. Kevin Walsh, now back on Earth analyzing complete ancient database, made another disturbing discovery. President Rodriguez, the ancient records contained detailed information about the crisis that destroyed their civilization. It wasn't just internal collapse. They were invaded by something from outside their galaxy. "What kind of something?" the president asked. "The records call them the Devourers, some kind of mechanical or artificial life form that consumes entire worlds and converts the material into more themselves. The ancient civilization might have survived if they had worked together, but their prejudices and competition made coordinated defense impossible. The implications were terrifying. If similar threats still existed in the universe, the current galactic civilization could face the same fate as their ancient predecessors. As if summoned by their fears, long-range sensors began detecting anomalous readings at the edge of the galaxy. Something large was moving in the dark spaces between galaxies, heading toward the civilized systems. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Unity, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled around him. 2 years had passed since the Kalari rescue, and now ships from dozens of species floated together in space, preparing to face an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered. The massive alien fleet had appeared at the edge of the galaxy 3 days ago. Their ships were dark and angular, made of some kind of metal that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. They had destroyed 2 outer rim colonies without any attempt at communication, and they were heading toward the core worlds. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from the advanced scouts," said Communications Officer Amy Chun, now serving as Jake's chief communications coordinator. "The alien ships are definitely not from our galaxy. Their technology is completely unknown." Jake nodded grimly. The fleet around him represented species that had been enemies just months ago. Ithrian warships flew alongside human destroyers. Altarian cruisers coordinated with Kalari medical vessels. Even the proud Draconian Empire had sent their most advanced battleships to join the defense. The change had not come easily. It had taken the discovery of the ancient derelict ship and its warnings about galactic extinction to convince the Council species that cooperation was necessary for survival. Even then, many had resisted until the alien invasion actually began. "Admiral Morrison." Came a voice over the communication system. It was Admiral Vex then, the same Ithrian who had once condemned humanity for saving the Kalari. "Our forward scouts report that the invader fleet has stopped advancing. They appear to be waiting for something." Jake felt a chill. Waiting for what? Before anyone could answer, Kalari diplomat Zara Kim appeared on the main screen. Her graceful form was aboard one of the Kalari ships, and her skin glowed with urgent patterns of light. "Admiral Morrison, our empaths are detecting something strange from the alien fleet. They sense fear, desperation, and sadness. These may not be conquerors at all." Jake was confused. "What do you mean?" Young Vexton, now serving as the fleet's chief translator, moved to the communication station. "Sir, I'm picking up very faint transmissions from the alien ships. They're not in any language we know, but the emotional patterns, they feel like distress calls. Can we establish communication?" "I think so, but we'll need to use Kalari empathic abilities combined with human technology. It might be the only way to bridge the gap between completely different forms of life." Jake made a decision quickly. "Do it. If there's a chance these aren't enemies, we need to know." The next hour was tense as human and Kalari communication experts worked together to decode the alien transmissions. What they discovered changed everything. The invaders were refugees. Their entire galactic civilization had been consumed by the same mechanical plague that the ancient records had warned about, self-replicating machines that devoured worlds and converted them into more machines. The Dark Fleet was all that remained of thousands of species, fleeing desperately ahead of the mechanical swarm. They'd been running for decades. Vexton translated as more messages came through. Their aggressive posture was because they thought we might be connected to machines. When they destroyed those colonies, they were trying to test our defenses. Zara Kim's skin showed patterns of deep compassion as she listened to the alien messages. "Admiral, they're asking for sanctuary. They know they brought danger with them, but they had nowhere else to go." Jake looked around his bridge. This was exactly the situation Kalari had faced when their star was dying. Refugees desperately needing help from people who didn't know them. "How long do we have before this mechanical plague arrives?" Jake asked. "According to their calculations, maybe 6 months," Amichan reported after consulting with the alien fleet's navigators. The next few days saw the most remarkable transformation in galactic history. The same council chamber that had once voted to abandon the Kalari now hosted emergency sessions where species after species volunteered resources to help both the alien refugees and prepare defenses against a mechanical threat. The Andromedan refugees, as they came to be called, brought advanced technology and knowledge of the machine plague's weaknesses. Combined with the diversity of galactic species and the cooperation model that humans and Kalari had pioneered, they began developing defenses that no single species could have created alone. Dr. Kevin Walsh, working with Andromedan scientists and Kalari healers, made a breakthrough discovery. The mechanical plague has one weakness. It can't adapt to biological systems that are constantly changing and cooperating. It's designed to fight static, predictable enemies. The solution required every species to contribute their unique abilities. Ithrian strength, human determination, Kalari empathy, Andromedan technology, Altarian precision, and dozens of other species' talents all proved essential. When the mechanical swarm finally arrived, they found something they had never encountered before, a galaxy united in diversity. Instead of competing civilizations that could be defeated one by one, they faced a cooperative alliance that adapted faster than their programming could handle. The final battle was unlike anything in galactic history. Ships of every design fought together, their different technologies creating combinations that confused and overwhelmed the mechanical invaders. Kalari empaths coordinated fleet movements while human captains provided tactical leadership. Andromedan refugees shared the locations of vital machine components, while other species provided the firepower to destroy them. Most importantly, when individual ships were damaged or cut off, others came to their rescue regardless of species. The same principle that had driven humanity to save the Kalari now operated on a galactic scale. The mechanical plague was not destroyed. Such things could never be completely eliminated, but it was defeated and scattered, its main force broken and its ability to coordinate shattered. In the aftermath, the old Galactic Council officially dissolved itself. In its place rose a Galactic Alliance, founded on principles that Jake Morrison had learned from watching humans and Kalari work together. That diversity was strength, that no species was worthless, and that survival required cooperation rather than competition. The formal founding ceremony took place on the same space station where the Council had once voted to abandon the Kalari. Jake stood at the podium, looking out at representatives from hundreds of species, including many of the Andromedan refugees who had chosen to stay and help build a new civilization. 2 years ago, humanity made a choice to stand alone rather than abandon people who needed help. Jake said, his words translated into dozens of languages and bioluminescent patterns. Today, we learn that when you choose to help others, you're never really alone at all. Behind him, young Vexton glowed with patterns of joy and hope as she prepared to speak in her role as the Alliance's first youth ambassador. She represented a new generation that had grown up seeing cooperation between species as natural and normal. As Jake watched the fleet disappear into hyperspace, their ships decorated with symbols from every member species, he realized that the galaxy had become something none of them could have imagined. What had started as one desperate rescue mission had grown into a civilization that would never again abandon anyone in need. The Kalari, who had once been written off as evolutionary failures, had helped save not just one galaxy, but the very concept of galactic civilization itself. And humanity, the species that had chosen compassion over convenience, had learned that the greatest strength came not from standing alone, but from standing together with anyone who needed a friend. In the vast darkness of space, the Alliance's ships glowed with the combined light of 1,000 different species, all working together to make sure that no one would ever be left behind again.